Somehow this show is doing worse numbers than The Acolyte, which astounds me, because if there's anything that's keeping me going, it's waking up every Wednesday knowing I have Daredevil to watch. Hi y'all, SnarkyJay cosplay here. As of the time of this video's recording, we officially have the third episode of the Disney reboot of the Daredevil series, Daredevil Born Again. And before we get this show on the road with my review, I do want to acknowledge that the viewership numbers for the first week of Daredevil are in fact out, and they genuinely are worse than the viewership numbers for The Acolyte and Agatha All Along. I'm genuinely enjoying the out of this show, so I think it's such a crime that it's doing that poorly, but to be honest, I think Disney has just alienated really big chunks of its fan bases, so I don't see a lot of people coming back to watch this one. However, this is not a Daredevil Defense Squad video, so let's get right into my review for Daredevil Born Again Episode 3. For the non-spoiler part of my review, I will go ahead and give you my rating first, and that is a 6.5 out of 10. While this is a slightly lower rating than last week's episodes, unfortunately, even though we're getting the courtroom drama aspects of Daredevil, which I absolutely love, there's some neat cinematography in this and some big surprises, I feel that this episode basically left Wilson Fisk with nothing to do for most of the episode. I get that it's Daredevil, it's his show, but I love Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk so much. To me, he is absolutely electric. He's a scene stealer. So when they're doing so little with him for an entire episode, I feel kind of like I got scammed. A little more Fisk would have been necessary. I don't know if they're starting to write this character as more of a minor character, but I really hope that's not the direction we're going in. And speaking of minor characters, one of the reasons why this episode gets a lower rating from me is that I'm starting to get the feeling that the side characters in this are really just going to be side characters. So for reasons I don't need to explain if you've already seen the first two episodes of this series, we don't have Foggy and Karen anymore. And one of the things that I really liked about Foggy and Karen in the Netflix series was they felt like real characters. They didn't just feel like accessories to Matt Murdock and his adventures, they felt like part of the show. And unfortunately, former cop Cherry and the attorney Kirsten McDuffie, neither of which has been written into the show enough, fleshed out enough, or even really has the same amount of charisma as either of the two, Foggy and Karen. So it feels more like a solitary Matt Murdock show and less like what we used to get, which I can't say I'm a huge fan of. Regardless, I still really enjoyed this episode. Like I said, the courtroom drama aspects are great. So, with that being said, let's get into it. From now on, there will be spoilers for episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again. You've been warned. In this episode, there are essentially two stories going on. Matt Murdock is handling the very public trial of Hector Ayala, aka the White Tiger, and Wilson Fisk is not doing much of anything. His whole thing is that Vanessa is trying to push him back into the criminal world, and he's too busy playing mayor. He's got his eyes on bigger prizes, and so there's essentially this continued tension. I mean, not only did she actively cheat on him and he accepted it, I'm assuming the bruised knuckles mean that he really didn't accept it, and I kind of hope that's what that ended up meaning. However, there's sort of a Lady Macbeth situation playing out here where we have one power-hungry woman and a man that has his eyes set on something else. Unfortunately, everything that involves Fisk's name in this episode is just him ignoring the criminal enterprise that he's trying to leave behind. That's almost entirely made up for by all the drama surrounding Hector Ayala's trial. At the trial, of course, Matt runs across Officer Powell, whose ass he kicked in the last episode. And while Powell threatens to expose him, Matt basically just talks circles around everybody legally, which is so sexy in ways that it shouldn't be. And he actually points out that the best cure for a black eye is fast hands. And if that isn't BDE personified on the stand, I don't know what is. Matt Murdock, the man that you are.
Stop it. Get some help.
Editing Jay, you've gone mad with power. It's been what, like 4 minutes? You should not be putting this clip on me at this point. So Nicky Torres, who's the guy that was getting his ass kicked on the subway, that guy was a former confidential informant for the NYPD in regards to drugs. These two cops, Powell and the other guy whose name now escapes me, they kicked his ass on the subway for reasons we do not yet understand. The prosecution does not want Torres to take the stand. And when he does eventually take the stand by clever manipulation, by Sherry and Matt. Unfortunately, Torres lies and says he was sitting at home. So Matt's star witness to Ayala's heroic act is completely f***ed. And at that point, Matt goes off the rails and pulls out his white tiger costume and is like, "Are you not this guy?" Which, to me, feels almost as embarrassing as the last time I was on a date and the guy had actually managed to find my cosplay account first. Except I think in this case, I'd actually rather be in Ayala's shoes because that was traumatizing. But at this point, the cat's out of the bag. So when they go back into the courtroom, Matt now has witnesses to Ayala's character, people that have been saved by the white tiger before. And the prosecution, in response to this, makes a very pointed comment that a real hero doesn't need to hide behind the mask. And that inspires probably one of the most cinematic things that I think Disney has done in like 10 years. We get this beautiful shot of Matt sitting within the courtroom while it's empty. He's sitting in the pews, and it's almost reminiscent of all the footage that we saw in the older show when he was sitting in church. And we know that he now has a distance to the church, and he's struggling with so much internally because at the end of the day, he wants Ayala to be acquitted, not just because he's a good lawyer and he knows Ayala is an honest man, but because of the whole vigilante storyline. And there's so much depth in that I genuinely did not think Disney was capable of. This is so good so far. I mean, I know that people have their complaints about it. I've read it. It's not a perfect show, so it's not like I'm brainwashed here, but it's stuff like this that sends me right back to 2015. And that's exactly where I want to be in regards to Daredevil. I want to be sitting in my chemistry class in 9th grade with my phone switched to Netflix, watching it under the desk. That's where I want to be. Ayala ends up being acquitted, which is a huge deal for Matt. He gets to go home and celebrate with his new girlfriend, Heather. And finally, Wilson Fisk calls BB Urich to have a conversation with her, another interview. He wants his voice to be heard. He starts bitching about vigilantes. We saw that coming a mile away. We already know how Fisk feels about vigilantes, right? We're watching Hector Ayala put on his white tiger uniform. He steps out into a foggy street. We hear a woman scream in the distance, and he starts jogging like real Baywatch in slow motion, like he's gonna go take care of business. Somebody walks out and just shoots him. And that person is wearing a Punisher vest. I have not been so desperate for a next episode of anything in a very long time. See, I'm not under the impression that this was Frank Castle because Frank Castle has been missing in action for kind of a long time. Ayala isn't really the kind of target that I think the Punisher would head after, but we've already seen 2 or 3 different cops within this show so far that have tattoos of the Punisher logo, which I think is a little on the nose. I understand that most of the people that were actively employing the Punisher icon for their own things, I think sort of misunderstood the Punisher's whole message. However, I think writing it into the show feels a little too on the nose, feels a little too real. I think something big like this is definitely bound to pull Frank Castle out of wherever he's hiding. Either way, I'm so excited to see where this goes. While this episode was lacking in some ways, it really made up for it in others. I love the courtroom drama stuff. I love how gritty this show is starting to feel. I mean, there's drugs, there's blatant assassinations in the street. This episode did not feel written by Disney. It felt very much a lot closer to the original series on Netflix, and that's exactly what I want. So for the few complaints that I have, I'm still really happy with this series so far. Looking forward to getting more of it, and that's all from me. I've been SnarkyJay. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more SnarkyJay. Be sure to check me out on Instagram, and if you'd like to support me, this channel, and my content creation, do check out and consider subscribing to my Patreon for exclusive photo shoot sets and cosplay content. I'll add links to all of those in the description below, and let me know your thoughts on episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again in the comments below.